Hello peeps, this is a Hillbilly Halfwit. How are you all today? And now I'm redoing this video because I did it yesterday and I didn't like the sound on it. So when the crackling sound like that, it does my head in. So I'm going to do this again, and this is about Plaid Cymru and how they've been working with Welsh Labour with the SFS scheme for farming, and now they're pretending that they aren't involved, and they're going around all these farm shows saying, oh, it wasn't us, it wasn't us. So I've looked in detail at it through this. Now I've got back onto ChatGPT, but I've got through it on Safari, so it isn't like it used to be at the moment. So just stick with it. So we will get it up and running, hopefully. But this is what has happened. So this is what I say. So Plaid Cymru, they're thinking that they're going to be the leader of Wales. They have agreed already that they're going to work with Labour and run the... If they come out as they don't have to be the top party. They can join with Labour and they're going to run Wales, but they're pretending they aren't. And they're basically pretending they haven't been working with Welsh Labour designing the SFS scheme, which they have. It's very easy to find out the info. Just go on to any ChatGPT. So this is what I ask. So Plaid Cymru have been working with Welsh Labour designing the SFS scheme, and now they are pretending they didn't, and most of us Welsh people have seen through it. Yes, that's a real point of contention in Welsh politics at the moment. Plaid Cymru entered into cooperation agreement with Welsh Labour in 2021, which ran for several years and covered a range of policy areas, including agriculture and rural development. Under that agreement, Plaid members were involved in shaping or influencing elements of government policy, not as part of the government itself, but through structured collaboration and regular policy meetings. The Sustainable Farming Scheme, the Welsh Government's post-Brexit replacement for EU agricultural payments, was developed during that period. While it's technically a Welsh Government policy, Plaid's involvement in the cooperation process meant they had input and some responsibility for the direction it took, particularly around environmental commitments and rural sustainability. Now that the scheme has become politically controversial, especially with farmers, over tree planting targets and payment structures, Plaid politicians have been distancing themselves, saying they didn't design the final version. Technically, they weren't the authors, but many in rural Wales have pointed out that they were in the room while it was being formed, so the current denials feel disingenuous to some. This has led to a lot of frustration among farmers and rural communities who feel both parties were involved, and that Plaid are now trying to avoid political fallout ahead of the next Senedd election. Well, here's my thoughts on this. The last scheme that was being used was the BPS system, and pretty much most farmers were happy with it all. Everybody from the larger farmers to the smaller farmers. And it was cheaper than the SFS scheme that's coming in now. And the country looked beautiful in Wales. There is nothing was wrong with Wales. It just looks beautiful. You just have to go and walk around and go on the hills, you will see. And this false narrative that Wales is what's called one of the worst countries in the world for habitat and stuff is just nonsense. Now, all that needed happening with the BPS scheme before was to leave it as it was. Everybody knew what was coming. Everybody knew how it worked. It's already there. But just have a bit of a cap on it, so some of these larger farmers who are raking the stuff in wouldn't be raking in as much money. That was all that was needed. But what is on go here is that basically the Quangos in Wales have decided to share the money that was going to farming structure and agriculture. They decided to give that money to the academics to try and push the farming community out, the indigenous farming community, especially off the Welsh hills. That's what this is all about. So then basically what they want to do then is get their older farmers out of there and stuff new young farmers in there who have come from university who get told what to do. That's what it's all about. And what they want is basically every farmer has had to go through some kind of university and been brainwashed. That's what they want in reality. So let's get going a bit further. So the BPS scheme is there, and it's perfect for everybody. So this is what I say then. Yes, because I'm pretty sure that they had a person in there all the time working on the SFS, which they did. You're absolutely right to pick up on that. Under the 2021-2024 cooperation agreement between Welsh Labour and Plaid Cymru, Plaid did have designated representatives embedded in policy development work, including agriculture and rural affairs. Here's a clear breakdown of their role in relation to the Sustainable Farming Scheme, SFS. Cooperation structure. The agreement created a cooperation board and policy groups where Plaid and Labour ministers advised and met regularly. Each policy had Plaid designated members who attended working groups, received papers and could influence drafts before policies were made public. Agriculture, climate and rural economy were named as areas of joint work. 2. Agriculture was a key pillar. One of the headline commitments of the agreement was to develop a post-CAP sustainable agricultural framework. This meant Plaid representatives were part of the discussions on how to replace the EU farm payments with a new Welsh system, i.e. the SFS. They didn't write the legislation themselves, but they fed into its priorities, especially around environmental standards and long-term rural development. Plaid had a named liaison called Cefin Campbell, MS, Mid and West Wales, was Plaid Cymru's lead member on the rural affairs under the agreement. He had regular access to Welsh Government officials and ministers, and Plaid themselves said he was working at the heart of government on rural issues. In practice, this meant Plaid had a permanent presence in the room during the design stages of the SFS scheme. So they are lying now when they say they didn't. 4. Timeline overlap. Key SFS consultation phases from 22 to 24 happened while the cooperation agreement was active. So Plaid's involvement was peripheral. It was during the core development period. The scheme's controversial tree planting requirements and baseline environment rules were already being drafted while the agreement was in full swing. They were in the middle of it all. Why this matters now? As opposition to parts of the SFS has grown, especially among farmers who see the tree planting target as unworkable, Plaid politicians have publicly criticised the scheme. But many in the rural community remember their involvement and see this distancing as political manoeuvring, essentially trying to keep the benefits of having been inside the process without sharing the blame now, and it's unpopular. Well, basically what is going on, they've been at the heart of this policy, which the idea is to push NGOs and charities and organisations not in farming, and they were trying to push most of the money from the BPS scheme towards the people like that. That's what's going on. So what they're creating in the SFS scheme, which people don't talk enough out, is other people having control of your farm. So vets, for instance, have more control of your farm. You have to have them here, and they have to check your stuff, and then you have to check every field with soil sampling. It's like total control of your own property. That's what it's all about. And then other organisations like the National Trust in these areas are getting more money pushed at them, and that's what it's all about. Pushing money in other directions except for the hard-working and indigenous hill farmer. So then I say, now they are distancing themselves as if they are not involved and even crawling to the farming community, and today the Conservatives put a vote down to have the SFS scrapped and go back to the old BPS system, which worked well in my opinion. It did, it worked very well. And Plaid voted with Welsh Labour against it. I really think Plaid are untrustworthy to the extreme. It makes sense that you feel frustrated. What you are describing is exactly the kind of political double talk that tends to hit rural communities the hardest, because people remember who was in the room when these policies were being shaped. The few key points about what happened today and in recent weeks. The Conservatives tabled a motion to scrap the proposed Sustainable Farming Scheme and return to the Basic Payment Scheme, BPS, as a transitional measure. That's a very sensible thing to do. Something many farmers have supported because BPS provided stability, especially for family farms. Plaid Cymru voted with Welsh Labour to block that motion. That was yesterday. Despite the fact that in public meetings and on farms they've been striking a far more sympathetic tone, this follows a pattern over the last year. Plaid have criticised parts of the SFS, tree planting targets, red tape, payment structures in their statements. But when it comes to votes in the Senedd, they repeatedly backed Labour's legislative path or abstained at key moments. They are untrustworthy. And yes, while Plaid are now touring agricultural shows and meetings, positioning themselves as allies of the farming community, many farmers and rural voters haven't forgotten that they had an official presence throughout the SFS development under the cooperation agreement. They voted down an alternative path today that could have reverted to a familiar and functional BPS system. And now they are framing themselves as critics of a policy they helped shape. Whether someone agrees with the BPS or prefers reform, it's easy to see why trust has eroded. Rural communities in Wales often rely on consistency, and this kind of political manoeuvring looks opportunistic rather than principled. Right. Now, of course, people will say, I think people should vote for reform because reform said in their policy was to invite all the farming community together to decide their own policy. And I think that's the way to go. And I think most farming communities, and I don't know about the farming unions, but most of the farming community will happily go back to the BPS system, which worked and is already there. Now, this SFS has never worked because basically it was designed to take all the power off the farmer in Wales and hand it to other people. And money as well. That's what it's all about. Now, when you're voting for Plaid Cymru, and remember my dad voted for Plaid Cymru all his life, he would be turning in his grave at how untrustworthy they have become. They have been working with the enemy and now they're pretending they weren't. And they're going to join with the enemy, Welsh Labour, who've been attacking Welsh farming, and they're going to run it together again. They had the opportunity to stop this policy yesterday and they didn't. So please comment, rate and subscribe. Press that button down below to hype this around so people can see it. And I'm sorry I had to do this again, but I just don't like bad sound, okay? All the best.